when Governor Mark Dayton announced the 9 projects that were getting the $47.5 million from DEED. One of those was light rail. And Representative Ryan Winkler applauded that decision. He's here now to explain why you think that light rail should have been included. So thanks for joining us on Capitol Report. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Let's begin with that question. Southwest Corridor Light Rail Transit was awarded $2 million despite not being scored high by DEED in this process. So you applauded the decision. Why do you think it's important to include this project?
Well, one of the most important things government can do to spur economic growth is to make sure people can connect to jobs and to make sure that a growing metropolitan region like the Twin Cities has a good mass transit system to move people around, move goods, move people. And that's one of the core roles of government in making sure our economy works well.
So Representative Winkler, I want to ask you, is it appropriate, in your opinion, for the state's chief executive, the governor, to step in and include a project that wasn't included by DEED?
Well, I think the governor came in and used some common sense to include the Southwest Corridor Light Rail project. Frankly, I think the rankings that came from the Department of Employment and Economic Development were a bit odd. It's, I think, strange to claim that there's a bigger regional impact for a athletic field in the Minneapolis Public Schools, or a bigger regional impact for a stadium in St. Paul than there is for a light rail transit system that connects the entire metropolitan area together. So I think there were some flaws in the DEED rankings, and the governor was right to use some common sense.
Senator Senjum agrees with you. There could be some flaws in this process. He'd like to see the grant process continue and yet maybe look at tweaking that criteria a bit to make it a bit less political, using his words. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think if you're going to create a grant program, you should set out some criteria that need to be met, but you also have to have confidence that the people doing the evaluating are doing it fairly. The idea of taking politics out of government spending decisions is like taking medicine out of the doctor's office. There's no way you can do it, and you're not supposed to. Politics is how you sort out different competing interests, and you try to make the best accommodation that works for everyone. And it might not always be pretty to look at, but the legislature is actually the best place to sort those differences out.
And so given that, do you think that future bonding bills should maybe continue to look at including projects that some do consider local, like civic centers, or do you think they should focus on statewide infrastructure?
Well, I think the primary goal for any bonding project has to be its long-term economic impact for the state. And we have an interest as a state to make sure that local communities are strong and vibrant, so I think civic centers can be part of the mix. But we have a more fundamental interest in infrastructure like transportation, in research and innovation and education, the kind of people-building activities of government, and that's the best thing we can fund, and I think our capital investment dollars should go to support those things as well.
And now I'd like to go back to the actual $47.5 million in the DEED grants. When the press conference took place, the governor essentially stated, when given lemons, you make lemonade. So in your opinion, do you think the concept of even allowing these grant dollars to be distributed by the Department of Employment and Economic Development, do you think that that constitutes a lemon? And then do you think the projects that they supported were lemonade?
I guess I'm not sure about my fruit analogies when it comes to this project.
Just
I think the legislature couldn't make a decision about what it wanted to do. A lot of Republicans didn't want to vote for some of these projects, so they kind of punted over to the governor, and we have to accept the results of that. I think by and large the governor made good decisions, and Republicans shouldn't be upset after they sent the football over to the governor if he ran up the field a different direction than he wanted. They're the ones who gave him the ball.
And you did say that you think that it's the legislature's responsibility to put this bonding bill together, but do you like the idea at all? Does it have any merit of allowing some grant dollars to go to DEED to continue this?
Yeah, I do think it makes some sense. In transportation, we let the Department of Transportation make decisions about where to allocate resources. We don't get involved in earmarking transportation projects. So I do think there is some merit in having expert advice and opinion from neutral parties make some assessments and help guide those dollars. It does make some sense. But I think as a practical matter, the legislature will have to sort out those priorities, and there's just no way of making it a pure, clean, unpolitical process.
I want to ask you one last question, and it's just kind of speculation, but there was a lot of talk about accountability in how many jobs are created from a lot of these bonding projects. You are asserting that each project should have some long-term economic impact for the state. So do you think that it should be accountable as well? Should there be some some teeth to these? Should people come forward with numbers and hard statistics and hard, dollars of money that they think they can bring in?
Everybody brings forward numbers and statistics. Very often they are flawed because they don't look at the economic reality, which is if you spent that same amount of money on one project, you're not spending it somewhere else. And so you're really not necessarily creating anything new, you're just kind of picking which one works best. So the analysis of whether or not a project is really a worthy one should be based on really rigorous analysis. We didn't see that from DEED this time. I think maybe in the future, if we look at this more carefully, we could bring some hard numbers and a nonpartisan analysis, but it's going to take a lot more work than what we saw this time.
And I want to go back to something you said a little bit earlier. We do want to touch real quickly upon the new ballpark for the St. Paul Saints, and you're questioning its merit. So do you think it does merit some state dollars, given the economic impact that it could have?
Well, the Saints Stadium will help create some construction jobs now. I think that's a good thing in a down economy. That's kind of state stimulus. But you're fundamentally not going to create a lot of new economic activity. You're just moving it from one part of St. Paul to another part of St. Paul. And if it's because people want to have a new stadium to go to, I think that's legitimate. It's fine to spend public money to create assets that people like. But it's not necessarily a good economic project. It doesn't mean that it's going to create more activity or more jobs down the road. It just is something that makes our communities nicer to live in. And I think if we evaluate it as it's a nice to have as opposed to a job creator, we're better off.
So do you not think, the argument is that it'll spur some economic development and growth in Lower Town St. Paul. Do you think that it could have that effect?
It could have some effect, but there's no reason to expect that it would have that effect there more than where the stadium already is. The best numbers show that it's less than $1 million a year in economic impact, and yet the state's spending $25 million a year to help build it, which as part of a much larger project. So the question is, are tax dollars really getting a great return when they're being used to move economic activity in a relatively small amount from one place to another?
Representative Winkler, we certainly appreciate your time on all of these issues, so thank you again.
Thanks.